selecting a trig tool. We're going to be looking at pages 14 through 16. We're actually going to read page 16 first because that's our math notes. If you have your own calculator, great, please pull it out. If not, you will need to use your Desmo Scientific Calculator when we break up into groups. And if you have a highlighter, you definitely want a highlighter today. All right, so let's start on page 16. Page 16 is titled Trigonometric Ratios. You now have 3 trigonometric ratios you can use to solve for missing side lengths and angle measurements in any right triangle. In the triangle below, when the sides are described relative to angle theta, this angle right here, the opposite leg is y, the adjacent leg is x, and the hypotenuse is h, regardless of which acute angle is used, because it's always opposite that right angle. So we learned tangent last chapter. This chapter we're learning sine and cosine. And down at the bottom it says, in some cases, you may want to rotate the triangle so that it looks like a slope triangle in order to easily identify the reference angle theta, the opposite leg y, the adjacent leg x, and the hypotenuse h. Instead of rotating the triangle, some people identify the opposite leg as the leg that is always opposite, meaning not touching the angle. For example, in the diagram at right, the y is the leg opposite angle theta. So here's angle theta. This is the opposite side. This is the adjacent. And this is hypotenuse. Some people like to redraw it like this, but some people can just recognize, oh, that one's the opposite. Okay? All right, flip back over to page 14, and we are going to do question 68. Question 68 says, let's focus that. With your team, look through all the triangles first and see if any look familiar. If possible, determine the missing side length without using a trigonometric tool. Then, for all the other triangles, identify which tool you should use based on where the reference angle, the given acute angle, is located and which side lengths are involved. Write and solve an equation for the missing side length. So we are going to do A, B, and C together. And then in your groups of 4, you're going to do D, E, F, G, H, and I, okay? All right, so let's look at A. The first thing you want to do is you want to take your highlighter, and you want to highlight the angle measure given, which is 28 degrees, okay? Then from the 28 degrees, you want to see what the two side measures that they give you are. So this X over here is opposite. So write an O near the X. Then the side labeled 19 is the hypotenuse. So write an H near the 19. Then you go back up to the top and you look for the trig function that uses opposite and hypotenuse. Opposite and hypotenuse is sine. So we're going to say sine of the angle measure. So we write sine of the 28 that they gave us is equal to the opposite, and on the opposite side we have an x, so our variable goes in the numerator, over the hypotenuse, and on the hypotenuse we have a 19, so the 19 goes in the denominator. We make it into a proportion by putting a fraction bar and a 1. Then we can do a cross product to solve. So we're going to have 1 times x on the left, set that equal to our 19 times sine of 28 on the right, and then we just plug that into the calculator. So for the calculator, we're going to multiply 19 times the sine of 28 degrees, and we get this big long decimal. So for the decimal, we have 8.91. But next to the 1 is a 9. So do we stay or do we round up? We want to round up for this one, so we write 8.92. and we make the equal sign wavy. Any questions on A? All right, awesome. Let's look at B. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to highlight that angle of 45 degrees. From that angle of 45, this side over here is opposite. So next to the 8, you're going to write an O. This side over here is adjacent. So you're going to, next to the X, you're going to write an A. Then when you look up top, the trig function that uses opposite and adjacent is tangent. So the tangent of the angle, which is 45 degrees, is going to be equal to the side opposite, and there's an 8 there, so 8 goes in the numerator, over the adjacent. The adjacent is where our variable is at, so the x goes in the denominator. We make it into a proportion by putting a 1 in the denominator, and then we can do our cross product. So I'm going to multiply x times the tangent of 45, put it on the left, set it equal to 1 times 8. And then because the variable ended up in the denominator, we end up actually dividing on this one because the tangent of 45, we need to divide both sides by that tangent of 45. So on this side, they'll cancel, leaving us with just the x. And then on the right, we're going to type the 8 divided by the tangent of 45. So here's what it looks like on the calculator. 8 divided by the tangent of 45, hit the equal sign, and it gives us an exact number of 8, so we don't need to round on that one. This side and this side end up having the same measurement of 8 and 8, because this would be a 45, 45, 90 triangle. These two angles are the same measure. The two legs are going to be the same measure, so that makes sense. All right, let's look at C as in cat. So the first thing you want to do is highlight the angle measure 61 and then figure out what the sides are. Side 18 is adjacent and side X is the hypotenuse, so you can put a little letter H. So the trig function that uses adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. So we write the cosine of the angle measure given, which was 61, is equal to the adjacent. The adjacent is our 18, goes in the numerator, over the hypotenuse, and that's where our variable is at, so the x goes in the denominator, and that helps us to set up our proportion. Once your proportion is good, then you can do the cross product. So do x times the cosine of 61. Set that equal to 1 times the 18. Divide both sides by the cosine of 61. And here's how it goes in the calculator. We're going to have 1 times 18, which is 18. So 18 divided by the cosine of 61. Hit the equal sign. And we've got 37.12, but next to the 2 we have a 7, so we're going to round up. So we're going to end up writing our answer as 37.13. Okay? Any questions on A, B, or C right there? Okay. In your groups of 4, you're going to follow that same method. You're going to go through, you're going to highlight all the angles, and then you're going to name the sides if they're opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse. Then you can determine, and if you need to look up top, that's fine. Are you going to use sine, cosine, or tangent? And then you will need a calculator to get the decimal answer.